You can read something like this all the way through and still not really understand it. And that's one of the most practical ways AI can help. Not by replacing the learning, but by breaking a topic down until it finally clicks. If a topic feels vague, dense, or just badly explained, AI can act like a flexible tutor and help you approach it from a few different angles. In this video, I'll show you 4 practical ways to do that. Let's set sail. Let's start with a very common problem. You hear a word like inflation all the time. It's in the news, people talk about it like everyone already understands it, and maybe you kind of know it has something to do with prices going up. But kind of, it's not the same as understanding. So the first method is simple. Ask AI to explain the topic in plain language. This prompt alone is already better than just typing, "What is inflation?" because you're telling the AI how to teach, not just what topic you want. Now, ideally, the answer gives you something like this. Inflation means prices go up over time, so the same amount of money buys less than before. And that's a much better starting point. But even here, don't just passively read and move on. Slow down and notice what became clearer. Now, little inflation is normal in many economies, but high inflation can be a problem. And that's the real goal here, not "I have an answer," but "I can now say this more clearly than I could a minute ago." This is useful anytime the original explanation feels too formal, too compressed, or too full of jargon. A lot of the time, the problem is not that you can't learn the topic, it's that the first explanation was built for someone who already kind of understands it. Now that we have the simplest version, the next move is not to jump straight into a giant wall of detail. It's to expand, one layer at a time. This is where AI can be very useful as a tutor because you can control the level. So instead of asking for everything about inflation, try something like this. This is better because you're keeping the explanation connected to what you already understood. You're not starting over, you're building on your understanding. Now the answer is bringing in ideas like demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. And this is where that layering or building matters. At first, inflation was just prices go up and money buys less. Now it becomes prices can go up for different reasons, and those changes affect what people can afford and how businesses operate and how the economy feels day to day. And that's real progress in your learning. This method is especially good when a topic feels too big all at once, because a lot of confusion comes from being handed a complex explanation when you still needed a more basic explanation. And AI is nice for this because you can immediately follow up. And you can request an explanation about demand pull inflation. And you can also get an explanation of cost push inflation. And you can even ask AI what are things that beginners are most confused about. And this is a big shift from normal studying. You're no longer trapped with the one explanation on one page of your textbook. You can make the explanation meet you and your understanding. Now let's take it one more step. Sometimes a topic is still technically clear, but mentally it's still not quite there. You can read the explanation and think, okay, I see the words, but it still doesn't feel real. And that's where analogies and examples help. So now I might ask for a simple analogy for inflation and a real-world example. In this case, the analogy is, imagine you have a $50 gift card to a store. A year later, the card still says $50, but over time the store has raised its prices, so you may have been able to buy 5 shirts last year, but this year you can only buy 4. And that may not be the most sophisticated economic model, but it still works. Because now inflation is not just a definition, it's a lived experience. Then the real-world example makes it even more concrete. One thing to note though, analogies are helpful, but they're not perfect. They're a bridge. They help make the idea more understandable, but they don't capture every detail. And of course, you can ask follow-ups like, give me an even simpler analogy, or give me one example and one non-example. Or even, what does inflation feel like to an average household? This kind of prompting is where AI starts becoming very useful because it can keep reshaping the explanation until it becomes understandable. For the fourth method, we're going to switch topics away from inflation. Because sometimes the problem is not that a concept is too abstract. Sometimes the problem is two related ideas keep getting blended together. Weather and climate are a great example. A lot of people use them loosely in conversation, but they're not the same thing. So instead of asking for two separate definitions, ask AI to compare them directly. We ask AI to explain the difference between weather and climate and compare them side by side. And that side by side part matters, because that comparison helps reveal the difference more clearly than isolated definitions often do. In this example, AI is telling us how weather is what the atmosphere is doing right now or over the next few days, and climate is a pattern of weather in place over many years. And so things are already clearer, and then it gives us a side-by-side comparison so you can see the differences directly. And of course, we can give it some of the same prompts that we used in the inflation example. Ask for a simple analogy. Or what do beginners confuse about these two? This all may not be perfect, but it's all very usable in helping your understanding, and the differences become easier to remember. And this method works very well when a topic has two things that are very close to the same. Things like weather versus climate, or speed versus velocity, or accuracy and precision. When the ideas are close together, confusion often comes from the overlap between them. By using comparisons, you can understand them better. So let's think about what we just did. These were not just 4 random prompt tricks. It's one larger strategy. When you're not understanding a topic, you can use AI to simplify it, expand it step by step, make it more concrete with analogies and examples, and you can compare it against related ideas. And that order matters, because usually understanding doesn't happen all at once. It gets built step by step, and that's a much more realistic way to learn than expecting the first explanation to do everything. There are a few things that you may want to avoid. First, don't ask something broad like "teach me inflation" and then expect a great answer. You'll often get something generic, so give the AI a teaching role and a direction. So instead of "explain inflation," say "explain inflation in simple language for a beginner," and then expand on the causes. That is a much better learning prompt. The second thing to consider is don't stop at the first answer if it still feels fuzzy. That's one of the big advantages here. If the first answer doesn't make sense, you can keep reshaping that explanation. You can ask for it to be simpler or ask for less jargon. That's just good studying. And finally, don't confuse recognition with understanding. Seeing the explanation and thinking, "yeah, that makes sense," is not the same as being able to explain it yourself. So if a topic feels confusing, that doesn't automatically mean you're bad at learning it. Sometimes you just need a better explanation, a better sequence, or a more flexible way to ask questions. And that's where AI can be helpful. You're not using it as a shortcut or a replacement for thinking. You're using it as a tutor that can keep adjusting until the idea becomes clear enough for you to work with. And this is one of the most practical ways to use AI more effectively in your studying. Until our next voyage, I wish you smooth sailing.